welcome back to DJ's Darkside. We're going to read again from Deadly Treats. This one is called This Old House, and it is by Paul D. Brazil. 10 Sycamore Hill was, in Peter Ord's mind, the font of all his misfortunes. While women, work, cars, and kids came and went, the only constant in Peter's turbulent life, apart from the copious amounts of alcohol he consumed, was the weather-beaten Victorian overlooking Hart Village, its increasingly battered facade and interior seeming to degenerate with each one of his trials and tribulations. With every one of Peter's disappointments, a window frame would crumble. With every disaster, romantic or otherwise, a door handle would come loose, or slates would be ripped from the roof by an unsympathetic wind. When his health failed, so did the heating. And as Peter's bank account dwindled, the wallpaper and paint seemed to peel free from the walls before his eyes. Each night, as a drunken Peter staggered back from another interminable drinking session at the Ruby Arms, he would look up at his home perched on the hill, looming over the village like a great black crow, and, soaked in alcoholic self-pity, he would curse. Fuck. Or words to that effect. And then one late October night, Peter had an idea so bright that it was positively incandescent. The Ruby Arms, an anonymous country pub amongst a cluster of anonymous country pubs, was always smoggy despite the smoking ban. And indeed, the interior, including the mirrors, the windows, and the faces of most of the regulars, all seemed to have a nicotine sheen. As on most nights, Peter found the pub half empty. J.T., a gaunt, jaundiced-looking man with a spidery black quiff, sat in his usual corner table near a buzzing slot machine, drumming his fingers on his pint glass to the Shadow's Apache, which played from a crackly speaker. You know, it's actually possible to kill someone with a bottle of Pepsi and a packet of Mentos, said J.T., peeling an unlit pin-sized roll-up from his bottom lip. Oh, I? Peter hung his camel coat on the moose head rack and sat opposite J.T. with a sigh. Not a lot of people know that. Aye, said J.T. Well, according to your good friend Big Jim, that is, he reckons that he saw it on YouTube. Peter sipped his pint of Stella, gazed at the fading batwing tattoos on his hands, and faded in on the memory of a drunken night at a Newcastle tattoo parlor that then segued into the time he first met his wife, Deborah, at Astro's nightclub. 25 years ago now. There'd been a lot of booze under the bridge since then. He looked at J.T., a former hard man just like him, and had a flashback to the night when it all started to go wrong, when they'd thrown a rowdy punter down the stairs at Astro's with a little too much enthusiasm. The policeman on the scene had also shown a little too much enthusiasm for the arrest, and the ensuing injuries had, luckily for them, resulted in a suspended sentence. Peter's thoughts were interrupted by a loud bang, and then Big Jim burst through the doors. Peter and J.T. both laughed as Jim stumbled into the toilets, his fly open, muttering to himself. J.T. shook his head. You're still going ahead with it? Peter shrugged and winced with pain. So you reckon it's a non-starter then? He said, massaging his left arm. J.T. took a swig of Stella. Oh, great idea. Get Big Jim of all people, to burn down your house on bonfire night and then collect on the insurance. A foolproof plan, that. About as foolproof as that canoeist that did a Lord Lucan and ended up getting spotted in Rio or somewhere. JT had a point, thought Peter. Big Jim wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the box. However, Jim was cheap, and Peter really wanted rid of that house. The bills were mounting up, and the invalidity benefit that he started getting after his first heart attack barely covered his drinking sessions. Peter sighed again and slouched in his chair as he wiped his sweating brow with his tie. It's bonfire night in less than a week. Kids are always pushing bangers and fireworks through people's letterboxes. The firemen will run off their feet. Now, if I happen to leave some booze splashed around the place and work on my motorbike in the front room and it catches fire, well... They both looked up as Big Jim plonked himself down next to them. Peter, I'm your man, said Big Jim. Oh, I'll take that with a mountain of Saxa, said JT. Halloween found Peter propped up at the bar, tearing the label from a bottle of Newcastle Brown, watching Deal or No Deal while trying to ignore the numb feeling in his arm. It had been creeping up on him with greater regularity these days. Doctors were out of the question. Overpaid quacks. A conviction that had been reinforced when Dr. K misdiagnosed his dad's cancer a few years back. Feeling weak, he headed for a battered armchair in the corner. And then he heard the explosion. Bollocks! He hasn't. Hot, sweating, and wheezing, Peter rushed out of the pub and up the cobbled path towards his burning home. Tosser! He shouted at Big Jim, who tripped, tumbled, and stumbled down the path in a panic. As the pain in his arm got worse, Peter heard a sound behind him, turned, and saw a small group of vampires, werewolves, and ghosts waving pumpkins. Trick or treat! They shouted as they approached. Oh, bollocks! Peter gasped as he crumpled to the ground like a demolished building. The idiot had confused Halloween with bonfire night. The weight of a mammoth was on Peter's chest before the last stages of the coronary kicked in. While he writhed in pain, the costumed kids deftly lifted his wallet and watch. As his vision began to fade like a hot breath on a cold window pane, Peter looked up at his burning house silhouetted against the waxing moon. He could see the front door glowing red like the eyes and mouth of a grinning jack-o'-lantern, the flames darting like a maniac's tongue. And then, melding with the screams of the approaching fire engines, Peter thought he heard a mocking laugh. I hope you enjoyed.